Welcome once again to Dakota Starry Nights. As I had promised in the review of the Hubble UL-16 Dobsonian telescope that I was going to do a how to make it better. So here we are at the Three Amigos Class 2 dark site in the Buffalo Gap National Grassland. So let's begin with a real basic mod, which is going to really make a big difference on your contrast and your ability to see deep sky objects. So here's a picture of the shroud that you can order on the Hubble Optics website. And as you can see, it allows ambient light or daylight to come through. Right now it's right at 8:45 and it's not full daylight. The sun has set, but we've got enough light to where we can see in the distance. And as you can see here in this picture, the shroud lets in what I consider a significant amount of light, especially if you're using night vision. Now, not long ago I was at a star party to where we were at a Class 2 dark site, but unfortunately there was some campers about 250 yards out that had camp lights and that sort of thing out in front of their tents. And when I looked through the eyepiece, I noticed what looked like a bar of light. And it kind of threw me because I had never seen that before. And then I realized what it was. It was the ambient light coming through the light shroud. So if you're at a real good dark site, you might not have that problem where your lighting is under control. But if you have, the neighbor's porch light, or there's going to be people within, 400 or 500 yards of your observing site that's going to have light coming in and out, or even car lights, you're going to find that that's going to interfere with your viewing. Now, you may not notice it if you don't have night vision, but it will certainly diminish the contrast of your deep sky objects, and you might be wondering why the 16-inch is not pulling in more detail than you had thought it would. So what I did here was I got some fabric at a local department store, Walmart to be precise. It was relatively inexpensive. And what it's called dance fabric or dance wear. And what it is, it's a polyester stretch type material with a little bit of nylon in it. But the most important part, it has this vinyl, this black vinyl that they adhere to the outside of it. And that's what stops the light. You can hold it up to the light and you could definitely see it really makes a big difference not allowing that in. So here's a shot underneath the shroud at the same time with the same exposure ISO, using the dance fabric as a light shroud. And it's considerably darker. So I would suggest that you go ahead and have one made up if you're going to be in an area where you have this ambient lighting. Now the dimensions for this, I believe, is like 29 inches by 61 inches long by 36 inches at the bottom. So it has sort of like a wedge shape. And I would highly recommend having one made, or if you're going to use the one that Hubble Optics offers, just be sure that you're at a good dark site that you can control that ambient lighting.
So here I have the secondary cage, and this is a protein drink container. And what I've done is I cut the top of the threads off the container, slid it in 3 places after marking it, and put a small bungee, one of these small bungees, to secure it. And it works really, really well. Protects that secondary. And it looks pretty cool too. So that's an easy thing to do. Just get a container. If you have to go to the store and buy one, and you can see there it's just slit here and here and there. And to mark it, it's pretty simple. Put it up here and then just take a little marker. So this container is 9 inches. The inside diameter is 4.5 inches. You just want to make sure that the bottom of the container doesn't touch here, and that's how you can determine your cutting. And then to put it in is simply open it up like that. You want something that's kind of flexible. That's why this protein drink bottle was perfect. And then you lift it up to where it stops. And it's got this nice rim here. Clip it on there and you're good to go. Solid protection. You don't have to worry about that. The plastic bag thing, I never did care for that. It's hokey and it doesn't really provide any solid protection. Okay, before we begin on the next mod, I thought this little intro would help you guys understand what you're about to see on assembling it. So this is the next mod, Assemble, a setting circle. This was printed at Home Depot and laminated on both sides. And then I took a piece of beadboard. There's the edge of it right there, and this has been glued on top of that. Now that's fiberglass beadboard. It's the same material that they use on the Explorer Scientific alt bearings. And then down here is a piece of sheet metal. And then this is some tubing that has been split in order to cover the sheet metal edge so that, you know, you don't have a sharp edge there. And then it's been taped with packing tape to keep it held up against the metal. So that's what you're going to be looking at. And the way this works, there's magnets that you'll see in the construction. They're little magnets that are stuck to the bottom. They'll self-adhesing. And then I'll bring one around here so you can see it. And there's one right there. Button magnets. Okay, and there's about 4 of them. You don't want too many because you want to be able to slide this around like this to get your adjustment. And that will allow you to slide, but it will also keep it in place once you get it there. It's assembled upside down, so it can be kind of confusing when you're watching the video. But over here we have the feet. This part moves here with the outer bearing, and the inner bearing is stationary. And so basically what I've done is I put these feet, remove the other feet, and these have a nice displacement, you know, and these are nice and solid, unlike the ones that it comes with. I don't care for those at all. And you'll have to get an Allen head screw in order to fit down in the hole that's already tapped. It's a metric screw, so you'll have to pick one of those up. These feet I believe I got on eBay, or you might find them on Amazon. They're a hard kind of like rubber foot. And then in between, because this was flimsy, like I say in the video, I should have got something a little stiffer, but I went ahead and tapped out some screws. I put 3 of them in order to give it some center support. And then over here, if you look, you could see the Scotch tape here that I have this vinyl tubing attached to in order to prevent you from getting any cuts, you know, when you're handling this thing. Another thing I guess I should point out is that I went ahead and darkened this with one of those really wide Sharpies because the reflection coming down when the Dob is turned on an angle could bounce back up underneath the mirror, and so I wanted this dull, so I went ahead and did that. You could also maybe cover it with contact paper so that you don't get no reflection. Just remember, we're trying to eke out every little piece of light that we can get out of these deep DSOs. And again, here is the light. I point that out pretty good, I believe. So I put a piece of red tape over it, and that gives me a nice red light. And so I had built setting circles for this, and let's see if I got it right. And you could do this for any Dob. Your feet come through here and are supported up against this ring. And then this inner ring, then what it is, this is a piece of fiberglass beadboard, and that, if I got my measurements right, should fit. Yep, that's it. See, just with a little bit of play. Okay? A little bit of play. And then this was printed out at a office supply store, Office Depot to be precise, and that's a setting circle. And you can find this file on making adjustable setting circles for Dobsonian telescopes. There's a link. So to put the metal base on, that's going to support the Azimuth setting circle, you lay the sheet metal down and then put the bearing on top of the sheet metal, just like it would be sitting on the ground. So spacing it equally depending on how much you came in. I left about an inch overhang, but you could make it you know, ½ inch or whatever. The idea is that these feet, as wide as they are, will come underneath this and support this metal, and then screw from the bottom into this tap. And there'll be a spacer between the sheet metal and the bearing right there to allow the sheet metal to clear this bearing, which is stationary and attached to the rocker box. You'll see it as we move along. So I've scratched it here and here with a scratch awl, and then took a Sharpie and marked it there so I know exactly where they are. Make it a little easier to see it. Set this off to the side. And I've already drilled one. Now we'll move this over here. This could have been a little stiffer. You know, I should have probably went with something a little heavier gauge than this. I think it'll work, but if you go to buy something, keep in mind that, you know, you want it to keep it from flexing like that. This beading around here with vinyl tube helps. And the way you slit that open, you take one of these utility knives here, and then you put it to where it's just barely above. And if it's still too tall to where it's going to pierce clean through, then lay some electrical tape and build it up until you just got enough of that knife coming through to where you can split that tubing to get it around the edge to keep it, to give it support, and also to keep from having a sharp edge there rubbing up against that. Okay, so I can see that scratch mark, and I'll put this punch right there, this marker. Just give it a little tap to give me a nice little start. And now we'll drill it out. Okay, so now that we've got two of them, because you can only expose two at a time, the other tap is hidden over here somewhere. So we get the two first. See if there's one, and there's the other. Now you can make these holes a little oversized to taste, you know, so that you got a little bit of play there. So we'll put that there like that. This is a nylon washer, and that'll lift the metal off this so that it slides. This is moving and this is stationary. Okay, so that it will slide over that. Get the other one, put it here, and then lay this down on top of it. I'll screw these in. And now these legs are not adjustable. In other words, like the ones that comes with this, these adjust to make the box level to the ground. But what I don't like about these is this is a lot of weight is just on this little thing here, and I don't need it to be adjustable, because in order for the Azimuth setting circles to work, what I've devised is that platform that has those screws to adjust. That's the process, guys. You're seeing exactly how this is done. You know, when you do this kind of stuff, you try different things out and get it to work.
Now, Hubble Optics has available digital setting circles. They also have a wireless feature to it, and you hook it up with a tablet, and it looked pretty sweet. I'm a little more old school, and I do like a little less electronics when I'm doing visual work.
Okay, so because this was a little floppy, you know, see that's a little floppy. So what I did was I measured in from this edge to where the ring is, the one that these feet are attached to, drilled a tap hole with this drill, then tapped out a hole for one of these screws. It's a fine small screw. Cut it to length with these wire cutters. They have a bolt cutter in here, different sizes, 1024 down to 440. Vacuum cleaned it out, screwed this down in here, and now that's stiff enough. That's good. So there'll be one here and then one here. And I'll just drill where the dots are because it's already marked. Then tap it out, put the screw in, and we should be good to go. Now, before you put this all down, you want to get the setting circle in place. It needs to be in there first because otherwise you'll have to pull everything off and then put it all back on. So I'm going to pull these off and then tap this all down and put the setting circle in place. Alright. Okay, so now I have the holes tapped out for these secondary support screws right here. And there's 3 of them and then 3 feet. So here is the printed Azimuth setting circle that's been laminated on both sides. And it's basically the same for any Dob. You're just going to have a different way of attaching it to the bottom. Normally it's just the 3 feet, and you could still do the extra taps. But the next step is to get these self-stick magnets, and you want to put 4 of these on because this is going to stick to the metal. And you want to do this before you glue this all up. So you want them at 4 locations. So here's the 0. Want it to the outside. If the magnet is too big, make sure you put it to the outside because the inside is restricted. And that's 1. And then we get another one. So the other one will be at 90 right here. Okay, so we got that. And then the next one, of course, will be at 180. And you only need 4. You don't want more than that because you want it just enough to give it some resistance so that when you go to slide it like this to make your adjustment, you have some tactical resistance there. Again, these don't have to be absolutely perfect. Now this is the beaded board, so I've attached this to the smooth side so that it will adhere better. And there are probably a number of different products that you can use to adhere this. And I wanted something that had a little bit of play to it, so I went with silicone adhesive, which I happen to have on hand anyway. Okay, so now I've got a nice flat surface to work with. I'm going to use an old toothbrush as an applicator. Just going to put it on the old toothbrush and get it on there. Just like if it was. You want to be quick, you know, not the time to go for a cup of coffee. Now, you know, you might be thinking, well, hell, I'll just use contact cement. But the problem with that, if you don't get it right just right at the first time, you're pretty much toast. So this has pretty good tack, but it'll give you some time to adjust it. So this could be a thick piece of Formica, but like I said, this is fiberglass beaded board. I'm going to lay this down here starting at the 0, and that's the 0. Now I haven't like really pressed it down yet because I want to make my final adjustment when it's on the baseboard. There's the baseboard again. That looks good. And now we'll put this on. Yeah. Make sure my holes line up. Looks like they're good. We'll start with this. Putting this one in.
Okay, and then finally the last one. It's really not that hard. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things. It's just a couple of little steps, but it's not hard, and it's certainly a lot easier than going with electronics and all the cabling and the wiring and the software and batteries, and oh man, I tell you, it's too complicated for me. I like it a lot simpler, and this works so well. Okay, flip it over. Now we're going to push our setting circles, make sure it adheres. Yeah, you don't want to put too much, you know, but you don't want it smearing all over the place. That toothbrush worked really well, so I'm just making sure that it's adhered in there. And because it's beaded board, it has that a little rough surface. You might want to take some sandpaper, like some 80 grit, and kind of buff that beaded beads up a little bit so you get some of that sheen off there, so you get a little bit of adhesion. That's it. And the way it works, like I showed you earlier, go here 0, go to a star, and I still got to put the pointer on here, but the pointer would be here in the middle somewhere. I just tape it out and put it in the middle. And then if the star's at 50 and it's reading 40, then you just do this. See that? You just turn it. That's it. And it'll stay there because the magnets are adhering to here just enough to keep it there. And so you've got a Dob with adjustable setting circle. Love it. Love it. All right. Looking good. Looking good. So what we have here is the cap light in order to see your azimuth setting circle at night. What I've done here, I've just mounted it on a block of wood. And there's the back of it. These holes, just ignore those holes. Those were already there. This is a scrap piece of cherry. Those are pocket screw holes that are not part of this mounting system. And then over here I've got a little spacer block to pull it back about a ½ inch back away from the edge. And that's so that this clears the dial, so that when you're looking down, this doesn't block the dial, so you can read it a little bit better. You could always stand to the side and read it like on an angle, but having it moved back like this allows you to do that. So I removed the band that normally comes with this, and I have a zip tie right there to hold it on there. That way you could pull it on and off if you need to replace it, or certainly when you need to change the batteries. It'll make it a lot easier. So the dial here is held on by these two screws, and these two screws hold the dial and hold this block of wood back here all at the same time. And the screws obviously are long enough to go through the spacer and into the 3/4 inch block. Now you want to be careful, you don't want to get this any higher than that, because when you come swinging down with that's 3 inches, and that's about the max for height, because the bar on the altitude bearing, the crossbar, when it comes down here, it'll swoop down to about that high. You know, whenever you start to lower the Dob, it'll come down to about that, but it should clear that. So you don't want it any more than a ½ inch away from here, and no higher than 3 inches above the angle iron there. So what we have here is a ground board. And what I like about this, as opposed to putting this just directly on the ground, is that you've got a nice stable platform that also keeps moisture and dirt and grass and bits like that coming up underneath the mirror, because the mirror is exposed. It only raises the scope about 1 3/4 inches. The other thing I did, and I showed it a little earlier, I have removed these feet that come with it, and I feel that that's really not adequate. The diameter of that bolt isn't really robust, and there was some
guys complaining about, vibrations and things like that, which may or may not be due to this, but I just don't like that. So what I did was I went ahead and purchased these rubber feet, and these are much wider, provides much more stability, and just replace these with that. Now that means that this is not adjustable as opposed to that, but you don't need it because with this platform here, you wouldn't need it. So basically, this is a MDF, a medium density fiberboard with oak veneer on both sides. Now that's medium density fiberboard, not particle board. This is typically used for furniture. I spaced these 2.5 inches in and spaced them asymmetrically from each other. And I've taken a bolt, and this is a machine bolt. It has a hex head, and I cut a piece with a hole saw out of a piece of oak, 3/4, with a hole saw that's about 1.25 inches or 30 centimeters wide. I run this bolt through there. I believe that's 3/8, and then I countersink a hole here with a Forstner bit, then pound that in there, take a washer and a nut and tighten that up, and now you've got a foot, okay? And this is overall, it's 2.25 inches, so that's a 2.25 inch machine bolt. I suppose you could use a carriage bolt too, either one, but you just need to countersink it. Then these are available at a hardware store. They are a tap that you drill a 1/2 inch hole, and then you take a hammer and you set this in there, and it has these 3 anchor points that you put your screws in, and that keeps it in place. And it works really great. I've used this for other different techniques. And then you can adjust. And these stick up a little bit, but because we have these feet, you see, that's it right there. So even when these are screwed all the way in, we still have clearance. There's about a 1/4 inch clearance, so the Azimuth sheet metal will sit right here, and it'll still clear it even when that's screwed all the way up. In order for the setting circles to work properly, you have to have the Dob as level as possible, because that's going to affect your Azimuth settings. When this goes around, it has to be level all the way across. So getting back to the Azimuth ring, you just need an astronomy program to get your Azimuth dialed in and your alt dialed in. Now the easiest way to adjust these is to go on Polaris, because Polaris doesn't move around in the sky. It does, but it's very, very little. So that way you can move your Dob onto Polaris, and then you pull out your astronomy app. And here I have Sky Safari. We'll go to Polaris. There it is there. And then we'll click on Polaris. And any astronomy app that has this capability will do it. And then you center it. Okay, and then up here it says it's 3:59:11. So there we are at 3:59. Okay. So then you go back to your eyepiece, and you should have a reticle eyepiece, and make sure it's centered in the crosshairs, and now you're aligned in Azimuth. Okay, for measurements in altitude, what we have here is a piece of oak that has been beveled on both sides to fit into this shoe here. So you'll need to get one of these shoes, and that will easily attach to the rim of the secondary cage. And then we have 2 springs here, one here and here, 2 butterfly nuts, and a piece of flat steel that you could drill holes in to receive these bolts. And these come through, and they're countersunk in here. This is real simple stuff, but it's highly effective. And what this does is, this is spring loaded now, see? So it'll move. So you pick up one of these Wiki digital angle gauge, and I got this on Amazon. This model has been discontinued as of this publication. What they have now is a Type 2,
which is better because what it is, it's backlit. So that at night, when you're going to read this thing, you'll be able to see it in the dark. What I've done, because this one isn't, is I've put a little light here. See, that comes on, and it puts a red light up against the digital gauge so I could read it at night, because this not being backlit, you can't really see it, and I don't like putting the cap light on and off all night long. So I'll just hit that little button and that lights it up. Again, that has this red electrical tape over it, and that works pretty good for me. The reason why I recommend the Wiki digital gauge, there's lots of different manufacturers, but I've had one of my subscribers say they picked up another kind of brand and it wasn't as accurate and it was jittery and jumping and got off, and he had all kinds of problems with it. This has been a very good digital gauge. It has really good reviews on Amazon. It's about 26 bucks for this digital gauge, and I recommend getting this brand. That said, the way this works, this is magnetic, so you stick it on there like that. Then you go to Polaris and you find what your altitude reading is for your particular latitude, and then you will adjust it like this, up or down. Now, once you get this adjusted, the next time you put your Dob together, you're only going to barely have to turn these a little bit left or right, because this will always be in relative same position. So initially you might have to turn it a lot to get your adjustment, but after that it shouldn't take but a little turn or two to get it right. And now what you do is, like I said, you go to your planetary program, you center the target, and you read the Alt-Az location, and you just turn your Dob until these numbers line up with what's on your planetary program. Typically you're not going to be dead on it, but you'll be, like I said, in about the size of a pizza pie. You should be somewhere in that zone, so you move your Dob around a little bit and you'll pick it up. So what's cool about this slides right in here like this, just like a finder scope, and you tighten that in there, and then that holds it. So then what I do is at night, because you don't want to be dropping this is on there, but I still don't quite trust it at night. So I get O-rings, and just enough to where it puts just a little bit of tension on there, and that gives you like a little safety strap. And that's how that works, guys. And I'm telling you, I have been super pleased with this. This thing works so well, and it's so simple. The key to it is that they're adjustable setting circles. You have to be able to adjust them, and you use them in conjunction with your phone and your planetary program. Works great. In the original review, I talk about putting a felt pad here to keep the out bearings from slopping back and forth, and I still recommend that. But there's a little bit of difference on this one. What I did was I took a piece of vinyl and added it over the felt, and because I was still getting the Dob slipping a little bit with the heavy optical package I have on the front. I have a dew shield, I have a 35mm Panoptic, usually night vision monocular, and you get the drift. So this is sort of like spring loaded. As you could see, it moves in and out, and that gave me, it's just very thin, folds over on the back, and it's taped back here with the handyman's secret weapon duct tape, and comes over here like that, and so the bearing slips down in here, and this rubs up against the side of the bearing. You can see the mark right here. This is not going to damage anything. It's just vinyl. It's not scraping or scratching or anything like that, but it's giving enough friction in order to give it just the sweet amount. This right now operates like a Mercedes-Benz. It is just beautiful. I love it. Okay, so if you're still having trouble in altitude where the Dob is either, dropping down and it won't hold position, and you've tried the weights and you've tried this, I've come up with another way, although I haven't tried it because I haven't needed it, but I've come up with another solution that you might find useful. And that is, you can drill a hole through here right where it intersects the bearing and tap it out, 1/4 inch tap, and then take a 1/4 inch machine screw right there with a nice head on it, put a piece of felt on here. Okay, they sell those felt buttons that you can buy for chairs and things like that, and just attach it to the end of that. Then screw this into the angle iron, and once it comes through, you're going to screw this out until you get the right kind of amount of friction against it, and then you can lock it in. Remember, this is tapped. This hole is tapped, so you're going to lock it in with this little wing nut, and then that'll hold it in place. So just be sure you put that felt button on there, and make sure you check that before you start a session to make sure it's on there. If you start feeling it dragging or you're hearing some grating noise, you better check and make sure you still got that felt on there, because you don't want this metal to metal rubbing up against that alt bearing. So that might help you guys out that are still having a hard time trying to balance your Dob. Alright guys, that'll do it for this workshop. I sure hope you found the information useful. If you hit that subscribe button, you'll get notified as soon as the videos post. And in the meantime, stay safe, and thanks for tuning in to Dakota Starry Nights and Clear Skies.